Welcome back to Ash's Reality Recaps. This is Married at First Sight Decision Day. Thankfully, this train is finally coming to an end because it's just turned into an absolute disaster. So let's jump into the recap for last night's episode. Well, with last night being Decision Day, Chloe and Michael were only 2 to 3 weeks into their wedding, so it was not their decision day, but we do get to touch base with them at the end of the episode, which again was an absolute train wreck. So, Chloe and Michael are still married as far as this episode's concerned. Let's move on to our next couple. Lauren and Orion are already divorced. They divorced in like the second or third week of the show. So they've had some bits and pieces here and there throughout the season. Nothing crazy. They're already divorced. At the end of this episode, they do talk to each other. They extend the olive branch to be friends and to kind of start getting back into each other's lives. But as far as the show's concerned, they're divorced. Move on to our next couple. That brings us into Becca and Austin. Becca and Austin were our first official couple of Decision Day last night. And during their conversation, you could see that there's just a very uncomfortable situation. Like, Becca doesn't trust Austin. Austin's basically checked out. Everybody called this through the entire season. Come Decision Day, the pressure was going to be put there from the experts, and they were going to say yes. Well, the pressure was put on them from the experts, and they said yes because the experts said, well, imagine what it can be like once all the cameras are gone. This lasted about 24 hours, literally 24 hours. And we'll get to that at the end of this recap when we touch base with all of the couples together. But just know that they said yes on Decision Day, and 24 hours later, they were done. Shocker, right? Right. Let's move on to our next couple. Emily and Brennan. Well, this disaster we called out last week for basically playing the system throughout the entire season. Now, that did not get brought up last night. I wish it would have, because last week, when they both admitted to having a conversation at the beginning of the season because Brennan wasn't physically or emotionally attracted to Emily, and they made an agreement to play it through so Emily could experience the season, well, that should have got called out last night, because to me, that's just one of the biggest jokes of this entire process, but unfortunately, they got to slide by on that. Well, during their time with the experts, during Decision Day, again, everybody already knew they was going to get divorced. There really wasn't very much dialogue between the two of them that was positive, aside from pointing fingers at each other, and Brennan basically saying over and over again, I was protecting Emily, I was protecting Emily, I was protecting Emily. We have no idea what he was protecting Emily from, but all we know is that by the end of it, they said no, they wanted to get divorced, and they got divorced. Let's move on to our next couple. So Cameron and Claire were together 3 or 4 weeks and then separated 3 to 4 weeks. So they spent probably more time separated than they did together. So as far as anybody's concerned, they were technically divorced at this point. I mean, they wasn't technically divorced, but they might as well have been. Well, of all the couples, these were the two that actually sat down and had a mano-a-mano conversation. They seemed to come to terms as friends. It was kind of awkward because Cameron told Claire that he felt her as a sister, which was just odd. You could see they care about each other, but it was just a very, very weird dynamic by the end of it. But they ended up saying no and walking away as friends for the first 24 hours. And then it kind of got rocky the next day. All right, so let's get into the scene at the end of the episode. So at the end of the episode, after all the Decision Days have been completed, except for Chloe and Michael's because they're still married, after all the Decision Days have been ended, they're supposed to all get together 24 hours later, have a little luncheon together, have conversations about how the season went and where they all stand and what they're going to do to heal themselves. So what could have possibly happened in 24 hours to turn this get-together into an absolute shit show? Let me tell you. So, Claire and Emily went out together to a bar. While they was at the bar, they saw Brennan and Austin at the same bar having drinks, which is not a big deal on face value until you add in the fact that Austin and Becca's female producer was with Austin at the bar. Now, I'm assuming that something had to happen for them to immediately call Becca and let her know that there was, some shadiness going on with her husband in a bar with another lady. And apparently, 24 hours later, when all the couples got together, Becca was so heated, she walked out the door and sat down and just started grilling Austin. Did you go out last night? Who did you go out with? Was the producer there? And then she made a comment that showed that there was some kind of interaction between Austin and the producer throughout the filming of the season, because she said, we've had this conversation. You already know that how I feel about her. it was just awkward. It blew up in front of everybody. So, like I said earlier, 24 hours later, they're now divorced. They've decided to get divorced. It's unreconcilable at this point. So they're divorced. So we're officially, an over season, barring Michael and Chloe, which we already know that they're probably going to separate anyhow because they just don't really match very well together. So at this point, all of the couples are divorced except for Michael and Chloe. Their decision day is going to be next week. Now, how did all the other couples fall apart? Well, during the rehashing of everything that happened during the season, Claire steps up and basically makes a comment to Austin about lying and how all the guys lie, and Emily chipped in and said all the guys are liars. So basically it became a she said, he said situation where all the women said all the guys are liars and they're just trying to protect their image. And all the guys basically said, you're overstepping your bounds, we were trying to protect you. And it was just very awkward. Well, when Claire said something to Austin, Cameron stepped up and said, Claire, I have to step in and clarify some stuff that you created drama because you said that Brennan called me and asked me to double date with him. And the actual conversation was I called Brennan and said, hey, when this is all over, we should go out on a double date together. So Claire threw all that out of proportion, which created issues between Emily and Brennan, which didn't really matter because at this point, Emily and Brennan were already lying about the season and probably shouldn't have been together anyhow. So at the end of the day, this entire season was an absolute farce. Aside from Becca and Austin potentially having some chemistry, which at the end of the day, I don't even think that Austin was attracted to Becca, there's really not a lot that this season has to hold on to itself. I'm not really sure how they can have a future season of this show. And as much as I hate to say it, I hope that somebody takes a step back and looks at the show and questions very, very in depth if this is actually a show they want to carry in the future. Because it's gotten to the point where all they care about is their image. It's gotten to the point where they are lying just to be on the show. It's gotten to the point where the couples know that they're not a match, and they're lying to each other so they can stay on the show and basically get all this free stuff. And it's just turned into an absolute farce of a show. Yeah, I watch it. My wife watches it. It's entertaining. At the same time, we shake our head constantly going, what is this? And why do we watch it? That is Ash's Reality Recaps, Married at First Sight, Decision Day number 1. There will be a new episode next week for Decision Day number 2, which will be Michael and Chloe. And supposedly they're going to follow 3 of the couples, even though they're already separated and divorced, which is probably just going to be more of a shit show of a disaster. But hey, we'll tune in, we'll get a recap, and we'll share it with you. So see you next week. Ash's Reality Recaps.